Welcome back to Pulling Focus. I'm Ryan, and today we're here with Dewey Steadman from United Therapeutics. Dewey, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, so for those who don't know what United Therapeutics is, can you talk a little bit about the company?
Yeah, so we were founded in 1996 by a family seeking a cure for their daughter's rare disease. And almost 30 years later, we treat around 15,000 patients with rare disease. And then we're also seeking technologies to extend the lives of patients through unlimited supply of transplantable organs. And we've got, like 1,300 employees now, and 500 of them are in North Carolina, and we've got a $3 billion run rate. And all this because we're trying to find a cure.
Yeah, incredible growth over the last few years too, right?
Yeah, since I joined 5 years ago, I think we've more than doubled our revenue run rate. Probably tripled our share price, and we have probably 50% more employees.
That's incredible.
It's amazing.
In 5 years. Tell us about your position and what you do there.
Mm-hmm. So I run, my title is Head of Investor Relations, but I essentially run investor relations and also media relations. And so I am the primary spokesperson for the company, believe it or not. They trust me with that. I don't know why. And I'm also responsible for communicating the UT story to all outside stakeholders, especially investors and media, and then also folks that are interested in ESG, environmental, social, and governance initiatives. That transparency function runs up through me.
Okay. And your background is from Wall Street, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you transition from Wall Street to PR, being in charge of the story of this huge company? Walk me through that.
Yeah. So on Wall Street, I was actually covering specialty pharma and generics companies, so essentially a little bit lower science than biotech companies like us now. So I've been familiar with the industry since I started in equity research in 2006. And I wanted a better quality of life. My wife and I were having our daughter, and I just wanted not necessarily less hours, but more predictable hours. Wall Street is pretty intense. It's rewarding, but it's incredibly intense. And then also the people on Wall Street, they're extremely smart. I've been in rooms where I'm the dumbest person in the room and everybody else is smarter than me. But everybody else on Wall Street tends to focus on money and earnings. And what I really like about working in the industry is being able to focus on patients, especially at UT, where we're a very patient-centric organization.
Yeah. And I think that's the part that fascinates me about your story is how empathetic and compassionate you are just as a person, that it seeps its way into your work and has kind of led you in this direction. I'm curious, part of what you're in charge of too is the investor relations side of things. And so like understanding that you're in charge of the story and the public facing message from a PR side, but also what the investors see and how you utilize some assets from that angle as well, is, I think, interesting and particularly unique. Can we talk about some of like the challenges, because United Therapeutics, the type of company that it is, you guys are not marketing through traditional channels to try and get new customers. It's a very different approach. Yeah. Can you just give me like the high level view for people who are maybe in different industries to kind of understand some of those challenges?
Yeah, so on the marketing side, we're in a highly regulated environment, and FDA dictates a lot of what we can say and can't say in our marketing materials. And so when we're advertising a drug, you've got to demonstrate the benefits and risks. And if you mention the indication of any drugs, then you've got a whole slew of disclaimers that you have to present as well. And so it's very regimented marketing that would be very different to someone who's used to industrial widgets in marketing those companies. And then for us on the investor side, we still have to follow those rules of the road, but we have to be able to tell a good story to get investors interested in us. And the rules change once you have an FDA-approved drug. And so a lot of these smaller biotech companies that you may see advertised on CNBC, like buy our stock, they're not approved yet. So they're not under the purview of the FDA in terms of what they market. And so it's very difficult for us to walk that tightrope and be able to get investors excited about the story, but also stay within the bounds of regulation.
Yeah, that's how important is the story aspect to the investors?
Yeah, so I think telling a story conveys who we are at UT much better than just a typical marketing message. You have some companies, some of our peers will give their key catalyst, and this is our cash flow, and this is our stock price, and this is how people love us and the future of our industry. But we don't really like to talk about ourselves in that way. We like to tell stories and talk about our culture, because it's a very unique culture. It is. We're very patient focused. We're actually a public benefit corporation, and so we have a corporate structure that allows us to put patients, shareholders, employees, and the communities at large shoulder to shoulder when making corporate decisions. So we act a little bit different than our peers, and so we want to be able to tell that story, and using different kinds of marketing materials like videos really helps us convey how different we are than that typical biotech company.
Was there a moment or a directive or feedback that you got from somebody that said, hey, we should be thinking about telling our story in these meetings? Or does that come from your experience on Wall Street, like making investments like that or helping other companies?
It's both, actually. So it's the way I prefer to tell stories. It's the way I prefer to convey a message about a company. And we've been trying to do it at three companies that I've worked at in the industry, is tell the story a little bit different than everyone else. And so it's a fresh and clean message compared to kind of the generic messaging of everybody else. We also had an initiative internally where we were telling stories before I even started. And we had a very creative team that came in and did some flashy storytelling messaging, slide decks, things like that. That was very, very good for who we were at the time. But we've evolved, we've become bigger, and we need to tell a deeper story to a broader audience. And I think video definitely is a way to do that in a way that is compelling not only to investors, but also to the physicians that we market to and the communities at large in which we operate.
Yeah, so you're able to kind of leverage just making content about the discoveries and what is happening there to serve all these different audiences, because the story is still the same.
The story is still the same. Yeah, and that's what we want. We don't want to have to tailor our story to various constituencies. Everybody should like it. And if an investor, we run into a lot of situations where investors want us to communicate identically to everyone else in our comp set. And we just don't want to do that, because that's not us, and that's not the way we operate. And it is extremely deep in the business. The way we make business decisions is different than all of our peers. And so we can't communicate the same way as our peers because we don't operate that way.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Over the last few months, we've been working together on a really large brand film for United Therapeutics. And I've conducted interviews with probably over 40 people now and at different stages of the company all over the country. And
multiple countries.
Yeah, that's right. Multiple countries. And, I feel that from everybody that we talk to, that they are bought in on this message, but they feel the power of that story at every level, which I think is very unique to United Therapeutics. There are probably other companies of that size and scale that, the people at the bottom and the people at the top are not communicating with each other in the same way. And, working together to kind of beat that drum, I think helps champion that through the organization in a way that is very unique to United Therapeutics' origin, and their, creativity, innovation, all of those things really come through all of the people that you talk to, which I think is unique.
Yeah, it is very unique. And I think the videos really help us convey our culture, not only to the current employees, but to future employees. They can see, as they're doing their research and diligence on us to take a potential position with us, they can see who we are through these videos and understand who we are. And we really spend a lot of time in the recruitment and interview process selecting people who can fit in our culture. And we do a lot of deep questions and different kinds of questions in our interviews to select that out. Like my interview process was 6 months long because I'd met with so many different people and had so many different kinds of questions and settings just to see who I was and if I would fit in with the team. And even with my team of two, it's Catherine and Harry. It's a very royal sounding team. We worked very hard to find those two folks who could purposely fit into our organization and thrive from day one. And they both have done a great job of that.
Yeah, definitely. And having met them and other members of the team certainly are great fits, and hopefully helps you out. I know you travel quite a bit. So I'm curious what feedback that you've gotten from either investors or management about using content like that in these presentations? And then maybe we can talk about how you're using them in the presentations, how you're presenting them to the folks, kind of the methodology behind leveraging the content.
Yeah, so we haven't done an investor day in quite a while, partly because of COVID and partly because there hasn't been much to talk about. But we're coming up on an inflection point where we likely will do one or two investor events next year, and the video component will be a key part of that because it breaks up the monotony of PowerPoint presentations and people coming up and speaking to mechanisms of action and market opportunity and things like that. And folks generally enjoy that kind of breakup of the day. We've also been able to give investors insight into our business that we wouldn't normally be able to give. So for investor relations, certain people in the organization are trained to interact with investors and no one else can. And so if we can get folks that don't normally interact with investors and get them on screen, and it's not a scripted environment, but it's a natural environment for them. And we've now scrubbed it to make sure it's regulatory compliance and accurate and things like that. We can give exposure to investors of parts of the business that they would normally never see, even on a site visit. And we haven't been able to do site visits as much as our peers. And so the videos really help convey who we are.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That I was unaware of how much regulatory stuff there is in the way of people interacting with those investors. Mm-hmm. I'm curious of, your experience with these investors. Are they, there are a lot of challenges around how to explain these complex ideas. And some of the science that you guys are doing is very, very cutting edge at, the edge of technology. Mm-hmm. Are some of these folks, savvy in that world, or are they is this totally like over their head?
No, some of these investors are smarter than us in terms of science. Us meaning the finance folks that are in the room. Some are MDs, some are PhDs that have chosen to move into the investment industry for various reasons. And so they know this very well. One of our covering sell-side analysts, who I enjoy interacting with very much, actually worked in an immunology lab that is currently helping us with xenotransplantation efforts. So he knows this space better than any of us do because he worked in it. So it's really interesting to be able to interact with those kind of folks, and it's been difficult internally to convey to people that some of these investors may know more than you when they ask the question. They're testing you when they ask these questions. But being able to uniquely convey a story, I think, helps break through the challenge of conveying something scientific to a generalist investor who may be looking at a mining company in the morning and then us in the afternoon.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I know that part of some of the challenges that we've talked about in making these videos is how to convey these complex ideas in a way that is digestible for both. Mm-hmm. That somebody who is really savvy and does understand the science and the technology gets what they need out of it, but is also layman enough for somebody like me who totally has no idea what some of the definitions of the words are or things like that. Is that something that you've received feedback on from either side, either internal or external, about conveying those complex ideas? Curious just generally like what feedback has been.
Yeah, so it's really me reaching out to folks internally saying, hey, cut the jargon down, cut the science down. We've got to make this simple for a generalist investor. And I've gotten feedback from generalists that they appreciate the efforts. And I've looked at some of our peer companies, and especially in the oncology space where it's very serious stuff that they're doing, but it's all like mechanisms and drawings, and this is how the molecule enters the cell and kills the cell or whatever, self-selects, and it's all kinds of like molecular pathways, and like I'm a molecular biologist by training, so I get it. But the generalist investor who runs a pension fund in Singapore is not going to understand that, and they're going to look at this presentation and be like, I can't understand this. I can't invest in it. And so we want to be able to break it down, to make it easy for a generalist investor to come into the story and say, I get this. This is rare disease. This is what they've been doing for 20 years. This is the organ opportunity, and this is where they're going in the future. And we want to make it as simple as possible. And then we also want to be able to cater to the folks that want to dive in with separate presentations.
Yeah. Have you seen measurable impact from using this with investors or internally that, ways that you've been able to kind of feel the impact of making these?
So I'm good at relating with people. I'm not good at actually marketing. So we haven't implemented the kind of metrics that a normal marketer would have. So we don't have click-throughs or anything like that. But we have received anecdotal feedback from investors that they appreciate the videos, especially the videos that we've done with you on Project Lightyear, so the Phase 5 net zero warehouse that we completed here in Research Triangle Park, as well as the Christiansburg designated pathogen-free facility, because there was a lot of interest in that. And so to be able to show footage of that, as well as some of the B-roll that we're able to capture inside the barrier, and you guys actually packaged up into really elegant B-roll, has been invaluable to share with investors. Internally, some of the feedback that I've gotten has been extremely positive. And then Martine Rothblatt, our CEO, mentioned that the DPF video was the most elegant video that she's seen describing UT. And so I can't get a better compliment than that. So we're only going downhill from here.
It's flattering to hear that from Martine, and I'm excited, for you and your team to be able to have these assets and to have champions internally and externally. You mentioned that you guys don't have traditional ways to measure marketing, like what people might be used to, click-through rates, view counts, things like that.
Yep.
How do you measure the success of making videos? What levers are you actually looking at?
I'm looking at praise from the management team and praise from investors, and also other external parties, so potential employees, what HR thinks of being able to use these videos in their recruiting efforts and things like that. So it's really kind of anecdotal, and I think as I go deeper into PR and communications, we'll develop metrics and measures to be able to evaluate the success of these. But for now, it's really just the right thing for us to do to be able to convey our culture.
Yeah. And when you think about, sharing the story of somebody like Dave Ayers at Revivicor, or some of these other folks, how do you prioritize? Like, how do you decide what part of that story is worth telling and when to employ it?
That's a good question. I think we want to make the story as simple as possible. So, and these scientists, Dave Ayers is the smartest person in every room that I've ever been in terms of just his knowledge of genetic engineering and creating and cloning, sheep and cows and pigs, and just everything that he's done over the last 3 or 4 decades is amazing. But the challenge that I have in communications and communicating that story is breaking it down simply. And so I think what I'm able to do through the videos and leveraging Press Record is conveying a simple story and getting people interested in it. If they want to dive in more, we can get Dave on the phone and dive in more. And we've done that with major media outlets, and they can go as deep as they want to after they see the video and understand the high-level part of the story. And I want to do that with Dave's team at Revivicor, and then the other teams that we have, research teams that we have internally at UT.
Yeah, it kind of creates the window of opportunity, right, for the viewer of It's just enough. And if they need to get deeper, here's how to get in touch with the right people, or here's who to talk to. But it opens the door for some who are maybe just at the surface level curious.
And the benchmark that I have for that is my daughter. And so when we're editing these videos, I show them to my daughter. I'm like, do you get this? And she gets it. She's like, oh, pigs, oh, wonderful. And she kind of understands what I'm doing. And I have a couple of friends, too, that are external that have no science background, no science experience, actually no finance experience. And I show it to them and get feedback from them as well. And if they're able to get it and understand it within for the science videos we've been doing in like 3 minutes, and they get it within the 3 or 4 minutes, then we've done a good job.
Yeah. And I think what I love about working with your team is that village of feedback effect, is that, in some cases, it's easy for anybody to create an echo chamber of, I just want you to tell me what I see that's wrong with it.
Yep.
And not necessarily see the good or see the forest through the trees. And I think part of what UT is so great at, with all of their diversity in culture internally and externally, it's nice to see that somebody might make a point and there's like an equally weighted counterpoint in some cases to a change or to an angle of a story, that it really empowers us as creators, but hopefully the viewers as well. With the product that gets all the way to the end, it's been distilled through so many filters that it positively impacts the story instead of continuing to whittle down and remove to the point of we've kind of lost the soul or the message to begin with.
And that feeds into one of the frustrations that I have as an ex-Wall Streeter is I want things done now. I want things done yesterday. Even though I grew up in the South, I still have, the 10 years I had in New York and Chicago, reflect on me now, where I want things done now. And a lot of this back and forth really frustrates me because it takes longer. But I've understood now that we end up with a better product because of that, whether it's the videos or whether it's our IR materials or whatever, that feedback is important. And it also is a culture aspect that we have where we're run by attorneys. So Martine was an attorney. Our general counsel obviously is an attorney. President of the company was an attorney by training. And so a lot of days I go in and it's debate class. And I hate debate class. But we do openly discuss things, and we're not afraid to share feedback, and even tough feedback we share with each other, and we don't hold back. And I think that's important to be able to do the work that we do, the revolutionary work that we're doing, but also communicating that in an effective way.
Yeah, I think that transparency from the top, like that sort of like no filter approach to how you guys communicate, makes its way into those final projects and gets out to the viewer of not that, these things are not compliant, but that they tell this story in a way that is true to the people who are living it and making the discoveries or performing the experiments. It is very authentic and organic to them and their situations, which is what I think makes them so strong. Yeah,
we want to be true to ourselves in the way we communicate. And we could put together the most generic PowerPoint presentation that could get every science specialist investor interested in us and drive the stock up to $800 a share tomorrow. But it's not a true story to ourselves. And we want to be able to create value in the right way with the right investors riding along with us.
Yeah, thanks for that. We're in the middle of Research Triangle Park, one of the biggest research parks in the world. And there's all kinds of other biotech companies around us and probably other people who are handling investor relations like you do. What advice would you give for somebody who's maybe has your position but at a different company about telling these stories in an authentic way, the power of that, or why it's important?
Yeah, you and every IR professional will know that you get opinions from everyone, and they're going to conflict with each other always. And so you take those into account. And if you hear something that's consistent from everyone, then maybe you should think about doing it. But if you're hearing it from like one or two people, don't rush to satisfy them, even if they're a giant investor. If it's not true to you, you shouldn't be doing it. You should do what's true to you, true to the culture of your company, and true to the team you represent. And that will drive value in the long term. There are a lot of people that are short-term focused, next quarter focused. And a lot of IR professionals are very, very good at communicating in that kind of manner. And that's just not the way we operate. And if you want a job for the long term, that's not the way you should operate either.
Yeah, that's powerful thinking. And, when it comes specifically to the storytelling side of things in not just the company culture, but the employees, the patients, the impact, we're of the opinion that those things are harder or almost impossible to tell in an inauthentic way. It's best to hear from the people what they think, what their experience is, for better or for worse, right? And dive into what their experience was to really get a better understanding. And maybe that helps your company grow. And maybe that helps beat that drum of your message out to the public and out to those investors. So a lot of our focus and, in our work with you is how can we tell that story in an authentic way that the, investors can understand, laymen can understand, but is still true to and authentic to your story.
Yeah, and through video, we're able to put people, and I mentioned this before, we're able to put people in front of the camera that normally wouldn't be put in front of investors for various reasons. And we can craft a controlled story that's from the heart from them. And they're the most passionate people in the company, the ones who are running the research or running the commercial operations. and I can go talk to them. And I'm very good at taking notes and being able to regurgitate those notes to the investment community or to the media. But it doesn't have the same impact coming from me, ex-Wall Street or corporate schmuck, versus the scientist who's discovering new pathways of cloning or new pathways of genetic engineering. And the video format allows us to get those folks in front of hundreds of people without taking up their time, too much of their time, because it's only a controlled situation where they're being interviewed, and instead of traveling around the world with me. But also we can craft the message very carefully using Yo.
Yeah. One of the things that you talked a lot about during this interview is sharing the message and talking about the culture of UT and being authentic to that culture. And, I think from the lens of a marketer, it's like a brand image and a brand story that you're really talking about more deeply. I'm curious, because you're not a marketing person, you're not measuring it in a marketing way, but you're still valuing it in the same way. Most marketers would probably think of this as like brand recognition, more eyeballs, top of funnel kind of content to help further people along on the buyer's journey. But for you, it's a little bit different. It's about the culture. It's about sharing that story. It's about people understanding what it is that you all do. And while you're looking at two sides of the same coin, you're still trying to tackle the same problems.
Yep.
So I'm just curious, do you ever communicate directly with the marketing teams to talk about brand image and work those things into these projects? And how do your teams collaborate? Are they leveraging this stuff in their own ways?
Yeah. So I do. I have a very close relationship with the commercial team. They're some of my best work friends. But also close collaborators. And they see value in what we're producing here for content. And they're even going to use some of our recently produced videos at the national sales meeting in January. And so to really motivate the sales force. And they also want to be able to use some of this content to talk to doctors about our culture. And so we actually use our status as a public benefit corporation, some of our philosophies around inventory management and patient-first philosophies to market to doctors. And so using some of these videos is invaluable for that, because we can get folks in front of physicians from deep inside the company that would not normally be able to attend those kind of events. So they do use some of our materials for that. In terms of brand image, the brand is maintained actually with the general counsel, again, run by lawyers. And we've always kind of operated corporate things like the brand image separately from marketing of commercial products. So partly because that's just the way we grew up, and then partly because of the regulatory aspects that the commercial team has to operate under. But I think some of the work that we've been doing lately has bridged that gap. And so we're able to do some brand work that helps the commercial team. And that raises all boats, both the corporate side and the commercial side.
Yeah, and what fascinates me about that is I think a lot of folks or a lot of marketers that I've interacted with see that as a big barrier. Maybe there's too much regulatory, maybe there's too much red tape, but you're kind of seeing it, glass half full, in that you're able to champion everybody behind this and grow in all aspects. And it's nice to see the whole team see things in that way too, where I think others would see a fence to climb.
It is a fence to climb, but I've chosen to let other people climb the fence for me. As we were talking about before we started, with a compliance review for a video, I'll let the commercial team or the product teams deal with the compliance review. We'll produce something, and we produce what we think is honest and true, and then let the compliance team make some suggestions post hoc, and I don't have to go through the ins and outs of doing that for some of these, which then just allows me to be creative, working with you to be creative and produce the best product we can. And so I'm not worried about the compliance on the other end.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Is there anything else that I didn't ask that you want to talk about or bring up?
Oh, there's so much. No, thank you for having me. And it's been a real pleasure to work with you and Will and the rest of the team. And just to have creative folks aligned with us. We we treasure that in the relationships that we have outside of the company.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dewey. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.